All right, it's time to talk with our featured guest, Tricia Casasanta. Tricia, how's it going?
Going great. How are you doing, Michael?
Doing pretty good. Thanks for asking. Tricia, if you can, let us know a little bit about what you do, how you help your clients right now in your business.
Okay, that is a very interesting question. We deal predominantly in the dental industry, so that's a plus. And we help doctors anywhere from practice management to HR. Practice management being business systems, training and development. And then in an HR standpoint, situations that happen, what are some things that they can do and helping find the resolution? We also couple that in with PPO negotiations, and that helps with the revenue stream and getting the revenue stream up there so that they can go ahead and pay for the team members that are there, giving them the benefits that they're needing. And then at the same time, the technology.
Technology specifically within the practice or how?
Technology within the practice. So technology being like a CIRAC machine or a computer system, dual monitors, training and development, anything that they can put as far as technology for efficiency purposes and for advancing the team.
Okay, that's interesting. So I know you have a wealth of knowledge in many things, but one of the first things I kind of wanted to start off talking about was effective leadership, more insights into inspiring leadership in dental practices. So, real quick, if I can ask you, have you ever had a situation where poor communication almost led to a critical mistake? And how did you handle it? And how do you recommend we should handle it? And what did you learn from it?
Before I answer that question, I think I want to preface it. Leadership is something that you never perfect. It is always you're striving to get there. We're human beings. We react in the moment and we're dealing with live situations coming at us. As you have those situations come in and as you learn how to handle them, you just get better and then you get better. You will aspire to get to an effective leader, but you're always constantly working towards it. If you ever have the attitude that you're the best leader that's out there, then you're setting yourself up for failure. Two situations that are very common in the dental industry. One, you have a bad hire and you don't react to it accordingly and you lose top team members. And number two, you have a bad hire and you don't follow the steps for performance improvement to finally maybe the dismissal, and that leads to legal issues.
We can kind of balance a little bit of the both, but before we get there, real quick, I know you mentioned being a good leader, you never get there, right? How do you know you're a good leader and not just telling yourself you're not good enough, you're bad, kind of a thing?
That's a great question. When I say you're never going to be that perfect leader, every stage of the game, as you're learning, you will get better and better. How you know you've gotten to that level is when the team follows you. You're able to attract team members who want to join your team because you have other team members saying how great it is, how great of a practice it is, or an organization it is. And then you also have team members that'll follow you, especially when you're going through change management, whether it be through technology or something that the organization or the practice has to go through. And the team has to be there and have your back, knowing that you're leading them down the right path. When you get there, they'll follow you because you've been able to prove it time and time again.
Gotcha. So they're following you with joy, or do you feel like sometimes they follow with obligation?
You will be able to pick up the difference. When a leader is being challenged the most is when there's change management. Something is happening and either the office has to integrate a new system or they're onboarding 2 or 3 new providers. There's something happening that's causing this change because we live in a world that's ever changing, right? So now that leader has to be able to identify what needs to happen, have it organized, and then notify the team. Communication is essential to great leadership. You have to communicate what's coming down the pike to each individual, each department, notify them what's going to happen, how is it going to impact them, get their feedback, and then take it the next level over. If it's done in this way, the team members will come along willingly because they partook in the whole process. Nothing's a surprise to them. More often than not, if you have a team member that's doing it, you can tell the attitude is there. There's definitely, I don't want to say negative attitude, but negative energy. They're not helping the cause. They're becoming the cog. They're getting other team members to go in the negative thought process instead of staying in, hey, this is a great thing for us to do. Let's just go through it. We'll get through it. On the other side, we'll be so much happier. So it's the behavior that's depicted from the team members where you'll notice it's not sincere. You can almost pick it out. I think everybody here listening knows or has experienced that themselves.
How do we know it's a negative attitude, or maybe it's just we're not listening to feedback properly?
So going back to my earlier comment, the leader needs to identify that whatever's happening, and then they go to the department and they go to the individuals and say, here's what's coming down the pipe. They almost go at it at a micro level. If they don't do that, then yes, it is going to happen. If there's an attitude or a sense of an attitude, the leader needs to take that team member aside and go, hey, I want to have a cordial conversation with you. I've noticed this. Talk to me. What's going on? They don't ignore the signs. This is a great analogy. So pilots, when you're in flight, have a flight book. And if anything goes wrong on that flight, they actually look at the flight book and it tells them what to do. Managers should have the same thing. Pick up on nuances, pick up on things, and okay, this is not going where I want it to go. What's in my flight manual? What's in my management manual? And they need to talk to that individual and nip it in the bud. At one point in check, there was an office manager that I had to deal with, and great lady, but all of a sudden attitude, just upsetting everybody on the team. And I just took her in the office and I just said one sentence, please tell me what's going on. This isn't like you. Within a matter of seconds, she just bawled out, started crying, and started telling me what was going on with her personally and how it's impacting her at work. Okay, now I know where to go with that comment. If I didn't go in with that very vague question, it could have gone somewhere different. So we were able to walk her through what was going on, how was it impacting the office, what could we do to help her out, because she was a valuable team member and we wanted to be there to help her. At the same time, she knew she couldn't continue doing what she was doing in the workplace.
That's interesting. Yeah. And it wasn't something like, are you okay? Where they're like, yeah, I'm okay. It was more of a, what's going on, open-ended.
There's a great book out there. It's called The Question Beyond the Question. Managers need to be asking more of, I call it the $1 million question. If you're going to ask the question, ask the one that's going to give you the answer that'll take you to where you're needing to go. And if we as managers or as leaders could start asking those types of questions, we will be getting more information to help us in the roles that we have.
I like that.
There's another example that a lot of dental managers can relate to, or front desk people can relate to. Somebody is struggling. They're not hitting production, for example. And I can go to them and say, what's going on? You're not hitting production. You know, our production has to be about 150,000 this month. We're barely getting there. What are you doing? Very defensive, right? The other way of asking that question is, hey, Jane, I've noticed that we're struggling this month and I'm not understanding why. Can you help me understand in your world what's happening that's causing us to fall behind in our production? What do you see? And I'm going to listen to what Jane has to say in order to see if there's something that we're needing to identify and deal with.
Okay. So you go in and ask the question, what do you see? And Tricia, sometimes, I mean, just kind of speaking from experience, we tend to, well, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, but Billy over there, I see him, he's been dropping the ball a lot, right? We just kind of like hot potato it to the next person. And in your mind, I guess you're so busy producing, doing other things that you're just, I never really kept an eye on Billy. He's just answering phones kind of a thing, but answering phones is one of the most important things. So how do we go from just trying to hone in on one person, what's going on, to now it's becoming something big? Is it true? Is it misinformation? How do we handle that?
Oh, that is a very good question. I think the first thing that we always have to remember is where you're going to delegate your time. We only have so much time in a given day. And I'm always going to be the proponent of you take the time to know what's going on in your practice, because when you do that, you will spend less time putting out fires and you will gain more time to do what you're needing to do to move the practice forward. So when somebody comes to you, you take it under advisement. You don't let it be the be all end all. So you take it under advisement, go, okay, let me walk this through. What is it that I am seeing? What can I quantify that's happening? And I'm going to dissect it. So let's say, for example, I'm going to dissect the fact that the schedule isn't getting filled. Normally, I would want to go to the scheduler, right? So I'm going to look at it. I'm going to go, okay, the schedule isn't getting full. Let me take a look and I'll talk to the scheduler. Talk to the scheduler and we say, well, what's going on here? We're not just getting a lot of calls coming in. All right. And on the calls coming in, I have a dashboard now that'll tell me X calls came in, X amount of those new patients scheduled. And if she has 100% ratio of what got called in and what got scheduled, she's doing her job. Then I'm going to take a look at, all right, if what she's saying is true, then let me monitor how many new calls are coming in. In a specific situation, we found that we went from 50 calls a month to 20 calls a month. It was just a little bit this month was less, a little bit this month was less, but then it accumulated to being about 20 some that we were missing. So in that particular situation, we have a person that was doing their job, but something was happening with the marketing company, which was affecting the amount of calls coming in. So you almost need to become the detective to understand. You look at your variables, you look at the statistics, and you help the statistics or dashboards to help you figure out where is the real problem happening. Now, in another scenario, this happened in an office that we were at. We did training on inbound calls. So individual calls in, and we had 98% acceptance of new patients calling in to scheduling to showing up. All of a sudden, it went down to 50%. What happened? Oh, we have a new hire in that position. Did we do any training with that new hire? Nope. So did we set them up for failure? Yes. And where am I going to put my energy? I'm going to be coaching them up.
Okay. So it's a lot of reverse engineering when there's an issue happening.
100%. 100%. Yes.
Okay. So then going back to the example that you gave of where you brought her in, you told her like, hey, what's going on? You motivated her a little bit more to perform. How do you deal with a team member who consistently underperforms despite all motivational efforts?
Well, that's a different scenario. So that's where you sit down with that individual and you have a heart to heart. And it's something where you now, throughout every process, you're documenting it. So you're doing a performance improvement process that you're going to follow. First one's going to be a verbal coaching. I don't use warning, I use coaching. This is what I'm looking from you. This is where you're falling short. Can we agree this is going to be what you're going to work on? It could be that I'm doing training. It could be that she or he is going to be developing other skill sets to hit their numbers. And they're going to have a certain amount of things to do. Then if the behavior still doesn't change, we'll have a second coaching session. Hey, what's going on? This is what we talked about. This is what we were going to do. You now have something quantifiable to refer to from the first coaching segment. Second one, just isn't my cup of tea. I'm just doing the best that I can. You go, I get that, but you said you would do this, and this, and you're not. And they'll say, we'll go another 30 days. If we don't see your performance changing, this could lead to your termination. And you need to be able to say that, because if they don't know that if behavior doesn't change and it doesn't go to termination, legally, you want to document it. And from unemployment, you want to make sure you document it. By the third time, we're having this is not working out. We're going to need to terminate you from the position. Or you might find that that person has better skill sets for a different position in the office and you move them. So there's two different venues that you could go down in that road, depending on what you learn through that coaching segment.
Okay, that's interesting. So then why would, because I noticed you mentioned and you emphasize you need to be able to say that, right? It's going to lead to termination. Why would we be hesitant to say that?
Okay, now we're going to go into personalities. So there's a program out there that I believe in and I teach and I live and breathe. It's called DISC. And DISC basically says we're all made up of different personalities. You have people that are very direct, and you have people that are, oh my gosh, I want to be your friend. And I just want the world to be a harmonious place to be. So if you're an individual where you're harmonious and you don't like confrontation, you will shy from saying the word termination. If you're the more assertive, more direct individual, you have no problem saying termination. So I guess it's like we all have different personalities. And when we're called upon in our leadership role, there's going to be some times that we're going to be asked to do things that are not within our comfort zone, but you do them because it's part of your role. That's why sometimes it's challenging for people to say termination if you're that type of person that just wants people to always work well together, hope things are going to work out. You just don't want the negativity. At least that's been my experience in working with things. So I was doing a speaking event for women in dentistry, and I was able to do the DISC. And then I asked for the audience, there was about 300 people there. I said, how many of you are very direct, to the point, don't like a lot of chit chatter, just you're that type of personality? I would say out of the room, not even 5% stood up. This was all made up of dental professionals, right? So then I said, well, how many of you are the chatty Cathy? You could just like talk about anything forever and a day. And people just have to tell you, well, we got to get to this stuff. Let's just get to it. And then you had about 25% of the audience stand up and did that. And then when you talk about the collaborator, the person that doesn't like confrontation, 50% of the audience stood up.
Wow.
And what that showed me is majority of the people that are in the healthcare or the dental industry are that type of personality.
They love collaboration, but not confrontation kind of a thing. Interesting. So you mentioned how like at the very end, there's two ways, right? You either terminate them or you look for a different seat on the bus because we're collaborators, right? So how do we know if we're looking for a different seat or we're just looking for an excuse to keep them in the practice? Because maybe they're like, doctor, I love you. I love this place and everything, but their standards are never up to par. And then your budget is only so much. And you're thinking like, there's nowhere I can keep you. So we can try this. How do we know?
I think being a leader is being very attentive and a juggler. So in addition to managing the team, understanding the practice's needs, is you're also building and you're forecasting. So you need to see what's coming at you. If you're in a situation where you're forecasting no growth and you're already at maximum with payroll, you already know that individual, either they're going to fill that position because all the other positions are filled and everybody's doing a phenomenal job at them. So it's this position here that either that person is going to stay or leave. If you're in a scenario where you know growth is coming down your path, you're showing substantial increases, your projections are showing you need to start filling these positions, and you already know what are the skills and competencies for those positions. And as you're coaching this individual, they actually have the skill sets for another position you're looking to build. That's when you change the seat. But you have to be intuitive as to what's coming down the pike, what you're looking to fill in order to be in that role.
Okay.
Now, you do have the slight minority that are manipulators. These are individuals that know how to manipulate the situation to get through in the workforce. There's not a lot of them, but when they do happen or when you do come across one, they know exactly what to say it, how to cover their track. Those are the individuals that will put other team members under the bus. So that's when you have to be on the lookout for something like that, because that happened to me. I had infiltration happening one time. And if I didn't catch it early, I would have lost my entire team.
Really? How did you catch it early?
Well, I had an open door policy and the team members knew who I was as a person. So these were team members that have been with me for about 5+ years. We hired this operations manager and she came on board. And in my face, she was telling me everything that I wanted to hear, but she was already planting the seed that certain people on the team were not the right people. At the same time, she was going to all the other team members and doing the same thing about me to them. So she was playing us all against each other. What she didn't realize is that we had a good relationship and we knew that we could go and speak to each other. When we started talking to each other, we started noticing how she was infiltrating our unit. And we basically said, you have to go. She was the toxin. Once we got rid of her, there was still some was anything of what she was saying truthful? But then it took about maybe 2 or 3 months for that to go away.
Interesting. So that's like that misinformation being spread and all that. So what was her end game then for that? Just to make sure everybody leaves, or?
I really don't know what the end game is because I don't understand that type of world. But somehow, some way, when somebody tries to make themselves be the main person, they're going to want more money later on, or they're going to want more autonomy later on. And I just learned that just doesn't work very well. And that's where you're always focusing in on the team. You're always tying the team. You have an open door policy. You're fair and balanced. The one thing that I think has helped me as a leader is if I make a mistake, I announce it publicly. I say, I made this mistake. Here's how I'm going to rectify it. And this is the outcome. You're going to learn more from your mistakes than you do from your conquests. And what you do is you learn from the mistake. You figure out what not to do to not let it happen again. And then it just makes you that better of a person. So everybody on my team realizes that if they make a mistake, it's okay as long as they learn from it and it doesn't get repeated.
Gotcha. Okay. I like that a lot. Now, I'm sure you know this, Tricia, but it's getting a little bit tough out there to find new staff all the time. And so let's just say, for example, something like that did happen in our practice. We found out this person was kind of manipulating, but then they came forward or we talked to them about them. We coached them, like you said, right? And then they're like, you're right. I'm sorry. I really want this job and I felt threatened or whatever. And then they're really repentant or sorry, right? Remorseful about it. Can we rebuild trust with a team member after like a major conflict like this, after they betrayed our confidence, or what do you think?
It all depends on the damage that was caused to the other team members, because the team members are watching the leader. And if the team members are affected to some degree, that their trust in that individual is gone, you run the risk of losing your other team members. That's a hard one to ask without knowing. You almost have to take it case by case to see what damage was done.
Okay. They're going to say, like, we can go until that point as well.
I got so many stories to tell you. We had a remote meeting and I hired this individual, and our first day on a group Zoom meeting, she's excusing herself. She's got her dog. She's petting her dog. She's not paying it any attention. And everybody's watching to see what I'm doing, which I didn't know about at the time. After we got off the call, I went to one of our other representatives. She's getting her walking papers. There's no way. She just started out of the gate, what have you. And plus, we were having some other issues with her, but that was just icing on the cake. It was only the second week that she started. After I let her go, everybody was telling me how they were texting each other on the Zoom call to see what I was going to do.
Always watching. So you live like in a glass house, basically.
Always watching.
Okay, that's interesting. Interesting. So really, really great insight on being an effective leader here. Now, if we could transition a little bit, because I know you work on insurance, like PPOs. When it comes to strategies for this and PPO plans, what have you seen the biggest effective things we can do, but what are some of the biggest financial mistakes you've seen practices make when dealing with PPO plans?
First of all, you have to be a great chess player. And the chess player is because these networks are all ingrained with each other. And if you don't have a working knowledge of it, it could put you in the wrong position. The biggest mistake that I see are mostly young doctors getting into acquisitions or de novos, and they want to be in every single network because they're wanting to get all these patients in, right? So they'll find themselves getting into each individual network, but they don't realize they all intertwine with each other. So you could be in with 18 networks, and there's one network paying you 65% in write-offs, the lowest fee ever, and you're getting paid on that low fee schedule with all of them, regardless of what the contract is.
Wow. Why is that? How does that happen?
We'll use Aetna. Aetna has a direct contract, but Aetna has 9 rental agreements. Has it with Mavericks, Dynamax, Connection, Carrington, Principal, Guardian, and United Healthcare, and the list goes on. So what happens is that when you're negotiating, you want to look at the one that's going to give you the highest rate so that you're going to get all of the ones that are underneath it to pay on that rate. It's these rental networks that each individual PPO group has or dental insurance has that makes it complicated. So there's a whole minutia of how all that works. And it is the game of chess. You almost have to play out all of your players. And then you have to figure out how you're going to get to the highest fee schedule, who you're going to enroll with, what are you going to do to keep certain networks out. So it's really a game of skill at this point in time. And I think that's the misconception. A lot of doctors feel that they can do it on their own when they're going in network, which some may be able to do that. But there's been several occasions where doctors will tell me, I wish I would have found you way earlier in the game.
Interesting. Do you recommend, Tricia, if it's like we're about to open up, majority of our audience are startups and acquisitions too. They're about to open up and then they're thinking, I'm going to start fee for service right off the bat or out of network and then continue. Do you recommend that, or do you recommend more like, hey, take on like 1 or 2 good ones and then maybe slowly drop them on the way? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so we have that scenario going on right now. First of all, is geographic location. If the practice is in a geographic location where you're limited on dental practices, I would still negotiate out just to see what you're able to get from the networks and identify which one is the highest one. At that point in time, you basically can make the decision, maybe I'll go in with the select few because these rates are really good, but I'm going to stay fee for service on the rest. Or you could start off fee for service because the demand is so high that there's not enough of the supply of doctors.
Mm.
If you're in a geographic area where you're in the inner city and there's like a dentist on every corner, and that in a building, there's probably like 5 in one building, you're going to need to have some type of a competitive edge. And that competitive edge is probably going in network, gaining the trust, getting the patient base up, and then slowly exiting out on a few networks that will pay very good out of network.
Gotcha. So geographical locations mean a huge part of it.
In my opinion, yes.
Okay, good. And then I remember in a couple practices we were in, many consultants told the practice owner, like, hey, you need to start taking this insurance, right? You need to start taking that. You need to start taking, even some said you need to start here in California, you need to start taking Medi-Cal, right? Medicaid, Medicare, Medi-Cal. Can you share a situation where PPO plans policy almost drove the practice to a financial crisis, like where this wasn't good?
In our hands, it doesn't, because we're getting a lot of times up to the UCR fee and how we get our doctors in network. However, I've seen scenarios where the fee is so low, they're forced to go in with Medicaid, Denti-Cal, Medi-Cal. They're forced to do that because they're needing volume. They're not getting it elsewhere. Some doctors go by volume of how many patients are on the schedule and not by what is the production per visit. It's mistake number one. But when they're looking at that and they're not looking at quantifiable data, when they do go into these networks, doctors are writing off 60% their UCR. I have one doctor where he was working Monday through Sunday. He was putting his 2 sons through. One was going through dental school, one was going through endo. We came in and he was literally writing off 62%. He was working his tail butt off because he had to work 7 days to make what he would have made in 3 days if he had gotten better compensation. So now we reversed that role for him because he went in it the wrong way. He's still in network. We were able to get all of his fees up higher by 55%, and he was able to drop the low paying ones. He didn't need to work Monday through Sunday. So he cut down his hours Monday through Friday. We were able to thin out the patient base, and we thinned it out by getting out of the low paying plans. Now, some doctors want to be in that plan because they want to give back to the community, which is great, as long as it doesn't overwhelm the amount of patients they need to be paying higher for the services rendered.
So you guys negotiate fees. That's part of what you do.
The part of PPO negotiations is that you study the provider's NPI, because there's various insurance companies that will go by NPI. So whatever that provider had at a location elsewhere as an associate will follow them. If they're buying or acquiring a practice, the seller's network participation will follow them if they're not careful. When they go to the new location, it's a clean slate if it's done correctly. And usually you have more bargaining power at that point where you can get, I don't know if this means anything to your readers or your viewers, but you can get up to $1,200 to $1,300 a crown in network.
Okay, that's really good. Interesting. From these two topics that we've been talking about, leadership, letting go of manipulators, and then like, hey, there's also at the same time insurances, PPO, dropping some, renegotiating, right? Kind of looking at the really minute details of these things in analysis. It can be risky. Well, a lot of the times we think, I'm going to drop Delta today. But, you see on the Facebook forums and other places, they're like, don't, not yet. Don't just do that, right? And then you see some people like, I'm going to drop this team member today. I just can't with them. So to you, what has been one of the riskiest business decisions you made to grow the practice?
I have never taken a risk to the extent that I haven't analyzed it. So I will analyze the variables before I make a decision. Now, are there decisions I've made where I worry about what's going to be the recourse of it? For example, if I have to let a team member go and that team member has close relationships with 3 or 4 other team members, I know I have to make that move. I have everything to quantify that move. I've done all the right things to make that move. But when you make that move, what is the rippling effect that's going to have? And pretty much 9 out of 10 times, it ends up being the right move, because if I was feeling it, other team members were feeling it. But that's a risk that I have to take. And that's a risk that you hope will go right, but it's a decision you have to make. As far as growing the business, everything I do is calculated. So I would tell a lot of your viewers, when you're making a move, you have to look at variables to identify what is the worst case scenario when I make this move and what is the best case scenario. You weigh the two out and you figure out which is the way you want to go. Talking about going out of network, Michael, let's just say, for example, this is a true scenario. I'm working with the client right now. He wants to go out of network. And in this particular case, he has every right to. And here's the reason. His patient base has outgrown the facility. He has 50% more patients than he has the rooms to service those patients. And now we have the ability where if he wants to leave Delta or if he wants to leave a few groups, we know how many patients that is. We know how it's going to impact revenue, and he won't feel a darn thing. Now, he's not going to lose 100% of his Delta, but we have a game plan that in a year, what we're going to do to announce it to the patients, get them ready, and then we're going to get them out of network. I have a reverse scenario where I have a doctor who has 800 patients. He doesn't have a ready cash stream available to assist them in case things go bad, and it's not the right time for him. However, with him, I'm going to go out of network with 1 or 2 networks to test out the market, see how it goes, do in-office training because the verbiage has to change in the office. We're going to see how it goes before we make any decisions that are detrimental. So you can be very strategic in how you approach that same scenario about going out of network, but based on the conditions of the practice, the cash flow, other variables, you can identify, do you want to go more of the conservative route or can you go the more extreme route? To answer your question, I really don't try to put myself in that position. I really try to analyze as best as I can to figure out which one of those methodologies I'm going to use, the conservative or the aggressive.
You mentioned about verbiage when you're dropping insurances. If I could ask, actually, from your experience, what has been some of the worst verbiage that's most commonly used today?
This is a great question. If you listen to some of the phone calls, do you take my insurance? No, that's the worst verbiage you can have because yes, there's out of network benefits and yes, you do participate. So just saying, no, we're not in network with your insurance is the worst verbiage.
Okay. Like the rejection after that, they're not going to even hear anything else that you mentioned.
Exactly.
Okay. So on the flip side, what have you seen be some of the best verbiage for this?
People have issues with verbiage or words and what they have tied in, but every doctor, when they're in network, they're participating to some degree. They're either participating as an in-network provider or they're participating as an out-of-network provider. There's insurance companies that pay very well out of network. So when a patient calls, the first thing that the office should be saying is, yes, we participate with your insurance. I'd be more than happy to call them to find out what benefits you have and how it will go towards your appointment. Done. And the reason I do that is because team members will call the insurance company and go, oh my gosh, this isn't a bad plan at all out of network. They start learning, right? And then the patient will start saying, okay, yeah, they participate. So I get to see them. But as long as you relay back to the patient what you found out, then that's also important in the process. But that is the verbiage that I use because it does 2 purposes, one for the patient and also for the team members to start learning how out-of-network benefits really runs.
Okay. So there's a lot that goes behind this, not just dropping an insurance and then saying like, hey, we're not taking your insurance anymore.
Yeah. So if anybody's thinking about going out of network, A, do your analyticals, find out, are you going to do the aggressive approach or are you going to do the conservative approach? Number 2, identify if you're going to do either approach, what is the verbiage you're going to talk to? You do inner office training on how to handle various situations. And then you do the patient journey. What are you going to do with the patient from the time they walk in to the time they leave to let them know what's going on and if they're being affected. And you do that for a year before you actually do it.
Okay, good. For a whole year then.
Yeah. Now, that's usually with Delta Dental. With the other insurances, you'll be surprised at how many pay very well out of network where the patients don't even pay attention.
That's good to know. Interesting. Now, just because I want to get in the head, and a lot of our listeners also want to get in the head of a really good coach, right, and consultant, when it comes to what you do, what are some things we can do as practice owners to make it effective? So, for example, you recommend strategies, you do this, but then you've worked with people who maybe you're like, they're frustrated because it's not working and they're blaming you. But in reality, you're kind of like, well, you're not doing this or you're not doing that. So what are some of those things?
It's training. You're talking about interpersonal skills. So when you're talking to me, you have to understand I've gone through a series of trainings in my professional development. And everything that I've done is a learning block. And I just keep building and building. And sometimes I'm not successful. And that's when I use the unsuccessful moments to dissect it. Okay, what happened? What did I not do? Why did it go wrong? And then I build my memory about, okay, next time around, this is how I'm going to handle it. So again, that pilot manual, I'm building inside myself things and strategies I'm going to do the next time around. but you got to have those building blocks, and you're not born with them. I took leadership training. I did DISC training. I learned from my mistakes, and I've had abilities to talk to people in a study club of some sort so that I'm building on my memory and I'm able to share my scenarios. So you almost have to put yourself out there and work on yourself to be that leader. So as a coach, you almost have to be able to find that person that's willing to do that, someone that's willing to take the time to do it, somebody that's willing to make mistakes, somebody that's willing to recover from those mistakes, and somebody that's looking to be humble. And you have to show that you're a person to your team, but you also have to hold the bar high at the same time.
So a coach is a leader who makes more leaders, kind of a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
With everybody in the team and everything like that.
Yeah. So like right now, I'm coaching up leaders. They're seeing from me everything from our ethics to, if anything goes wrong, I announce it. This is what happened. This is how I handled it. This is how I'm living to our core beliefs and our ethics. And this is the outcome. And we always, in every scenario, whatever happened, whether that patient or that client or that vendor, they always come back because they appreciate the honesty and they get to see that. And then I'm building that on them. And they say, okay, now in this situation, what would you do? So now after I teach them, they went through leadership training, they've gone through DISC training, they've gone through all the building blocks. Now they're needing to enforce it. So when they come to this situation, I go, okay, based on what you've learned, how would you handle it? I don't tell them, I let them handle it. And that takes time. So I'm taking time out of my table to give them so that they can learn, so that I can gain time in the future.
Have you ever seen someone try to fast forward that time?
Yes.
What happens there?
I'm able to convince them to slow down. They'll come on board and they'll say, well, I worked for a DSO and I had all these things and I did it. I go, listen, whatever happened over there, let it stay over there. Over here, I can't put you in a leadership role until you win the trust of the team. You're not going to win the trust of the team if you come into guns a-blazing. So take a back seat, get to know your team, have one-on-one sessions, give them the opportunity to know you. As things start happening throughout the year and they see how you handle it, they start trusting you. And then all of a sudden you're in that role. A year later, she's in that role. She understood it. And she came back and goes, I now understand what you tried to tell me at day one. I go, and I appreciate the fact that you listened. I had to slow her down.
Interesting. So they come in with the intention to go slow, get to know each individual one-on-one. Would you say also kind of get to know them like, hey, you want to go out for lunch or you want to do, or no, more like just get to know them professionally? How would you recommend it?
I would get to know them professionally. I'm going to keep it in the office for right now because you're still needing to keep that line of distinction there. And you're wanting to see what they do. What are their struggles? What would they like to see the practice do? What do they feel that they're great at? What do they see themselves doing in 5 years? You're trying to get a lay of the land for that individual. At the same token, you need time to observe their systems. I wouldn't change anything until you learn what is it that they're doing, what's working for them, what's not working for them, because every practice is different. Every owner is different. So you're not going to have certain things in systems for an owner that's not systematic. And you're just getting to know everybody. And then you're slowly going to be introducing things that the team has brought to you. Because when you do it that way, the team tells you what needs fixing. And then you come in and you go, I listened to the team. This is what unanimously was mentioned. And this is what we're going to fix first. And now you've got buy-in.
And you're writing this down.
You're always taking notes. And I always teach, it's called pacing. Always know what you're going to do, but you pace out when you're going to do it. You don't come in guns a-blazing.
Okay. So then little by little, they're going to mention to you small things. What happens when we're getting to know them, we're going slow, we see things that we're like, oh, I don't like that, but they're not major things. Would we nip it in the bud right then and there? Or can we let it slide unless there's something huge that kills the practice?
You pick your battle. You look at that and go, is that impacting my team? Is that impacting the performance? Is that impacting the patient? Is it impacting the practice? If it's no, 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 it's just bothering you, whoever you are. But it's not impacting any of the 4 other avenues.
So you said impacting team, performance, patients, and practice. Okay, that's good to know. Because I feel like you can go in, and I don't know what it is, Tricia. Like you have different vision on. You're like, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. You know what I mean? And you don't want to come in guns blazing, but at the same time, you're feeling like, is that bad? But it's good to have a gauge like that.
I took a part-time position, or short-lived. Let's just put it this way, it was short-lived. I was the chief executive officer for a DSO group. And out of the first day, that is exactly what I was trying to do. But then I had my supervisor pushing me and pushing me to do all these things. And when I finally left there, he started hearing from the team members of how they felt about me, to the point where then he wanted me to come back, or there was an interest to have me come back. And one of those things, it's like Rome wasn't built in a day. So usually a strong leader doesn't need that notoriety right away. You're working it from the ground up. And if you do it the right way, it's going to be strong. And you have to be strong enough to stay to your conviction, because what you do is people driven. You can't move if you can't gain the trust of the people. Production, collection, growth, you're not going to be able to handle those three unless you have the team to take you there. And if you can engage the team, empower the team, build that rock star team, the other stuff comes easier. So many times I see it being put on production, collection, and then they lose team members, and then they got to rebuild, and then they go like this roller coaster, because the production collection go down when they're trying to fill the position. It goes up when they fill it. That's not designed to be that way. But if you want that steady, slow growth, you need your team.
Okay. Gotcha. Interesting. So we want to continue to impact our team, and you can't move if you can't gain the trust of your team.
Exactly. And that's where you spend your time. Leadership has to put their eyes on everything, obviously, but the main focus should be building that team to the point where they want to be there and they want to be a part of the big picture.
Okay, I like that. Real quick, how do we know they want to be there, or they just want to keep their position?
When you ever went to a wedding that you didn't want to be there, did anybody know that you didn't want to be there?
I guess it depends on the wedding.
Or an event? Is there ever an event that you went to that you were forced to be there? Could you tell that you were forced to be there?
Oh, from someone? Yeah, you can see it.
You can see it.
So it takes us to have like a bird's eye view.
Performance and behavior, and what other team members say about them. What's consistently mentioned amongst the team members.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. And then last question is, any final pieces of word of advice you would like to give to our listeners?
Trust your instincts. Definitely take courses to become better leaders, business owners, and then do the same thing for your team members, and be patient. Actually, I'm saying a lot, but I guess if I had to put it all in one word, it would be: take a deep breath, enjoy the ride, but always make sure that for yourself and your team, you guys are embarking on training and development, because you're only going to be able to perform to where the knowledge is. If your knowledge is here, that's where you're going to perform. If your knowledge is here, that's where you're going to perform. And then allow yourselves to make mistakes and to recover from them. It's how you recover from the mistake that matters. Remember, everything in our lives, we are who we are because of the mistakes we made.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thank you so much, Tricia, for being with us. It's been a pleasure. But before we say goodbye, can you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes. Well, there's two different websites. There is PPOnegotiationsolutions.com. That is for the PPO, the insurance part of it. And then there's the SPSDentalAcademy.com. We do have some free training programs on there. And we also have curriculums and our courses that are listed on there. That will always continue to grow. We're now working on our leadership series starting next year. And then we do have our leadership workshops and our different workshops that are done in different areas. And those are in person.
Oh, wow. Beautiful. Awesome. So that's going to be in the show notes below. And Tricia, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a pleasure, and we'll hear from you soon.
Oh, Michael, thank you so much for having me.